How are you today? Welcome to this live in which we are going to do part 2 of this kind of impromptu, a little bit spontaneous class, which has come to be known as Write Your Screenplay in 2025. This was just inspired by the fact that I was getting so many messages from people saying, I want to write a screenplay this year. What should I do? And here we are. So yesterday, if you joined us for yesterday's session, we were talking about 4 things that you need to do that are kind of like foundation things, that are like mindset things, that are just things that really make sure that you will write it. And to be honest, those are the reasons you won't write your script. Like if you didn't watch yesterday's class, please watch yesterday's class and check that out, and you'll learn those 4 things that need to be in place for you to succeed at what you want to do. But today we're going to dive deeper into screenwriting craft, and we're going to talk specifically about 4 pillars or 4 keys that you need to really focus on and understand in order to write a really great script. Now, not only do I write scripts myself and have written many scripts, but also I have read a lot of scripts and I still read a lot of scripts. So I really see the mistakes that people make. I know the sort of common things that hold people back from writing really great scripts. And my goal today is to help you really get the tools, like widen your tool belt, so that not only do you write your script, not do you just get it written, but also you write a good one. Because let's be honest, that's the goal. So I'm just seeing everyone coming on live. If you want to say hi, please say hi. Natasha, hello, good to see you. Oh, I'm so happy. Maria, where can I find this class? So it's here on Instagram, but you can go to this page that I created and it's there. I hosted the replay on a page. And today's will also be on that page. So if you want to go back to it, if you want to take more notes or something, you'll be able to go check it out there. It's dianebell.com/screenplay2025. dianebell.com/screenplay. I almost wrote screwplay. That's where my brain is. Oh my God. That's funny. 2025. Okay. So that's going to be where you're going to find the, I'm going to pin that comment. Okay. That's where you're going to find the replays. And that's where you'll find the replay of yesterday's class too. And that's a super important one because it's kind of the parts of screenwriting that we might not really talk about, but which are really the important things. Because as I said, these are the things that will stop you. I made the live class. Can you hear me just now, guys? Tell me if you can hear me right now. Can you hear me? Let's see. Hello, Renee. I just watched the class from yesterday. Great. Awesome. Sylvie, hello. Louise, oh my gosh, hello, Louise. I hope you're doing well. So lovely that you're here with us. Morning. Okay. And Sylvie said yes. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Let me know that you can hear me. Yeah, thumbs up. Okay. Let's dive into it because I do have quite a lot that I want to cover today because screenwriting, there's quite a lot of things to talk about, right? So if you want to write a screenplay this year, it's totally possible. And actually, you could write a couple of them. You could write a few. Let's start. Exactly. And this class, just to be clear, this will be helpful for you if you are absolutely new to screenwriting. And I'm going to cover some things that are what we would call like screenwriting basics. But this is also going to be helpful for you if you are more advanced and if you have actually written a screenplay already or you're writing one right now. This will still be helpful for you. This is not going to be just beginner. This is going to be also things that could really help you along. Full Western classic. That's it. I've always been I love the Western style. It's always been my vibe. All right, my dears. So let's dive into this. Now, what I want to share with you is that the number one thing you must understand about screenwriting, and this is at all stages of the game, is that your job is to serve the story. And what I mean by that is that everything is there to serve the story. In a screenplay, just like in a film, nothing is there by accident and nothing is there by chance and nothing cannot be there without serving a purpose, right? A really good film, and it starts with a screenplay, is one whereby every single thing adds to something. Everything's got a reason for being there. There's no loose ends. There's nothing that doesn't matter. So the first thing that you really need to know as a screenwriter to write a great screenplay is what is this about? Like, why is it important that this exists? Why does it matter for me to write this screenplay? And it's a really important question for you to ask yourself. And I would really encourage you to journal on these questions. Like, why does screenplay? Why does it matter? What would it be for? What's the purpose of this? the big existential questions about your screenplay. But I think it's really important to know these things, because if we don't understand that, we don't really understand what we are serving. Like, what are we here to serve? Because screenplay to me is not so much often about what we put into the screenplay, but what we deliberately leave out of it. Okay, and to write a good screenplay, it's really about taking away everything that's not that, everything that doesn't serve it. Because everything that doesn't serve it is going to be weighing it down, dragging it down, and actually making it less interesting. And so your job as a screenwriter is to get really clear on what is the story that you are telling. Like, what is this about? Why does it matter? And it's that thing, not just about what is about in the sense of what's the story. Well, it's about this guy who lives in the future and blah, 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 blah. It's not about that, right? It's not just that. That's one aspect of what's it about. But it's that deeper level. What's it about? What's it really about? Is it about love conquers all? Is it about, the pain of loss and how we overcome it? Is it about, what is it? What is it about? And it's that thing for you as the screenwriter to understand, what is the purpose of this screenplay? Now that can sound a little overwhelming. You're like, Diane, steady on. But why does this screenplay exist? What's its purpose? Some movies exist to scare the pants off of people. Some movies exist just to entertain people for a couple of hours, to take them out of their daily lives. Some movies exist to expand us. Some movies exist to, just make us laugh. What is your movie for? Because when you know that, it's all going to become so much easier. You get so much clarity. Because one of the things that's overwhelming when you start writing a screenplay, or as you go on writing it, is there's so many ideas. There's so many things you could put in it. There's so many things that could happen. There's so many things that it could be. And that's sort of it could be this, it could be that, it could be this, and it could be that, and that could happen, and that could happen, and we could have these people. That's what overwhelms us. But when you get really clear and quiet and know this is what it is, this is the essence of it, right? This is what it's really about. Things will become clearer because you can start to release the things that it's not. And it starts to be okay, that's a great idea, but it's not this movie. It's not this story. Now, I'll be absolutely honest with you. Sometimes for me, I actually discover what it's about by writing the first draft. I don't necessarily know the answer to this question before I write it. Or sometimes I write the first draft thinking I know what it's about. And after I've written the first draft, I go, aha, and I realize what it's really about. And those of you who have written multiple screenplays will know what I'm talking about, right? That it's not always clear, and sometimes this is a voyage of discovery for you as the writer of it, and you don't always know. So if you're sitting there listening to this and you haven't written the screenplay and you're like, Diane, I don't really know, or I think it's about this, but I'm not really sure, I just want to give you this as a starting point so that you know that this is something you should be aware of, okay? And if you don't really know, go on the voyage of discovery and find out by writing your first draft. But at some point on this journey, you will want to get super crystal clear about that question. What is my screenplay about? What is the story that we're serving here? What is the purpose of this? Because when everything does just lean on that, it's going to get good. You're going to start to write a good screenplay. Now, I've seen a question here from Louise. I've been thinking of writing my screenplay as a book and then rewriting the screenplay. Is that a bad idea? Louise, I would always say 100%, and you know what I'm going to say probably. Trust your instincts, follow your heart. I've sometimes heard people being advised to write the book first as if that will help them get the screenplay made. And I am not a fan of doing things purely in order to get other results. And what I mean by this is writing a book because you think that's going to make it easier to sell the screenplay. I don't believe that that's true. There are tons of books written that do not help the screenplay get sold. The only world in which that would actually really make a difference is if the book becomes a massive success. So if it's for that reason, then I would question it. But if it's, just I really feel like I want to write the book of this, I feel compelled to, I feel excited by the idea, it feels expansive to me, it feels good to me, then that's totally an option, and we should always trust our own instincts and follow our heart and do what feels good to us. But if it's quite simply I'm thinking of doing this because I think it might be the smart way to do it, I would put a pin in it. I wouldn't do it. That's my 2 cents on that question. I learned all the rules of screenplay writing and I learned none of these apply. Put your money where your heart is. Nothing matters except your conviction. Yes, I would agree with that. Okay, So let's now dive into, now that we've kind of got that out of the way, that everything in your screenplay is there to serve the story and you need to know what that is. The first key to writing a good screenplay is all about the story. And really, this is definitely, we're going to get into a little bit of a discussion about story structure here. There are many, many books on the subject of good story structure for screenplays. My feeling about story, right, and it is like, a good film is a good story well told. And that's what a screenplay is. It's a good story well told. A satisfying story, right? Now, every story has a beginning, middle, and an end. And that's our 3-act structure for screenwriting. We have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And in these acts, first act is always going to be ordinary world, and then something happens to take us out of ordinary world. Second act is going to be the stakes get higher. The person is, your hero or heroine is going after what they want, or they're being blocked and they're facing different challenges along the way. And then the third act, we're going to reach some kind of resolution. Either they get what they want or they don't get what they want, right? Whether it's a tragedy or not. And we're going to have some resolution. Now, typically in a screenplay, the structure 1, 2, 1. And by that, I mean, first act is going to be ratio, the number of pages. Say first act is 30 pages, second act is 60, third act is 30 pages. So that would be your 1, 2, 1, right? Normally, that's what we would say. First act and third act are about the same in length, and the second act is the bigger one, and that's usually about double the length. Now, we could talk at length about story structure, and as I said, there's a lot of books that really go into detail about how to structure your scripts. And if you've read something like Save the Cat, it gets very detailed. Just out of interest, if you're here with me live, have you read any of those books? There's like Robert McKee's story. John Truby, I think, has a book. You read any of those books about story structure? My personal take on screenwriting story structure is that we do have this 3-act structure, and it's actually really hard to get away from. Stories just naturally have beginning, middles, and ends. You're a human being. You've been hearing stories, reading stories, consuming stories since a very, very early age. You've probably actually consumed, thousands, if not tens of thousands of stories in your life at this point. And I really have this feeling that like story structures in our DNA. We have an inherent idea of what a good story is and what it should be. And so, I am not really a big fan of things that are too prescriptive of this needs to happen by this page and that needs to happen by that page, because I feel like then we're really limiting ourselves into one mold for a story. And I'm a big believer that there are many, many different ways to tell a great story. And actually one of our jobs as screenwriters, I think, is to push the boundaries of it and to explore the story that's coming through for us and have the confidence and the faith to let it come through and see how it works, rather than try to shove it into a box that's already been prescribed, like the Save the Cat box. Now, not to take away from that, and if you love Save the Cat and if that works for you, you can absolutely use it. But I personally think our job as screenwriters is to channel the story that's coming through us, to trust it, to explore it, and to make it the best thing that it can be without trying to fit it into somebody else's prescription. The way that I tend to think of it is that, the 3-act structure is like the spine. And if you think of all vertebrate animals, we all have spines. And something that endlessly fascinates me, my kids have a couple of books. I don't know if you've seen these books with different animal skeletons. What's kind of amazing is how similar we all are, right? All these animals that have spines that you would think would be completely different from each other. But when we see the skeletons, they're not that different. And I'm talking about a crocodile skeleton and a giraffe skeleton and a bat skeleton, right? And you think these things have nothing in common with each other, but they all have spines, and it is very similar when you see the skeleton. So I think of us as screenwriters, we can't really avoid the spine. Your script is going to have the spine structure in it. But then it's like having the courage to find out what kind of animal your script is. And I see really story structure as being like the skeleton of your script, right? It's the bones. And it's really important that the bones are right. And what I mean by that is not that you try to force a giraffe skeleton to be like a bat skeleton, because that would be stupid. But you have the courage to let it be a giraffe skeleton, but you make sure that all the bones fit and make sense. Your job as a screenwriter is to work that story until you have all the scenes that you need to make it work, and no more scenes than that, right? You don't have extra bones that you don't need to have. You've got just exactly the number of bones, and there's an elegance to it, and there's a certainty to it, and there's a sense that everything's in its place and everything that's there is needed. There's nothing that's superfluous. There's no bones that actually, if I took away that bone, it would all still be fine. That bone shouldn't be in the script then, right? So we want just the bones that you need to tell the story, and we want the bones in the right order so that you have an elegant and efficient animal. Now, different animals are built for different purposes. Some animals are built for speed, right? Some are built for stealth. They have different functions in their bodies, and their bone structure reflects their function in life. And this goes back to what I said at the beginning of this, that when you know what your script is for, you'll start to understand better what your structure should be. All films are not created equal. If you're writing a film and you want it to be a very philosophical meditation on loss, it's going to have a very different structure than a film that you're like, I want this to be like a high octane, non-stop, edge of the seat, thrill of a ride of a film. It's a completely different structure. You can see that, right? It's got a different function. You're building it for a different purpose. And that's why knowing your purpose and knowing your story is so important, right? Because we're not just like doing it for the sake of doing it. We're doing it to serve the purpose that the script has, right? So story structure. Your 3-act structure, you're not going to get away from it, so don't even bother, right? But then it's having the courage and the wisdom to be the channel for your story, to understand what makes a story good, and to make sure that you are delivering in your script a good story, a story that is satisfying for an audience, that is interesting, that is engaging, that does push boundaries in some ways. Because what we don't need is just another sort of mediocre, blah, seen it all before kind of story. And that's always my fear with the sort of like those kind of real theories about it's got to be like this, it's got to be like that. It's like, it's got to be like that if you want to write another formulaic movie. If you want to write something that really has the chance to stand out, and let's be clear, we talked about this yesterday, really, it's like about 1% of scripts get made into films. Just let that land, 1%. So how are you going to make sure that yours stand out? How do you make sure that yours has got that special something? Like, it's really making sure that the story is something that maybe we haven't seen before. That's exciting, that's different, and that really pushes it. And if it is something that we have seen before, then what is it that you're adding to it that's making it unique, that's making it compelling, that's making it something that you don't want to just like switch off? Because it's like, it's satisfying, but I've read it 10,000 times before. We don't need that. So story structure is essential. And it starts when you're writing your script with the outlining and the planning. And I will advocate for this until the day I die. Like, I think it's so important to spend time to break your story before you start writing. There is a reason that every professional screenwriter in the world does that, right? People don't just start writing the screenplay like, I got no idea where this is going, but let me just write this. All professional screenwriters outline their scripts. There's a reason for it. Learn from the pros, okay? So outline, work out your story. Now, what do I mean by that? What's breaking story? Like I said yesterday, a lot of people come to screenwriting with actually an idea, a premise for a film, but they don't actually have a story. It's just like an idea, you know, like, oh, well, you know, I want to make a movie about, and it's this vague thing. Breaking story means we take that vague thing and turn it into actual scene by scene, what we're going to see on the screen. And that's what a screenplay is, right? A screenplay is a technical manual that is telling somebody what we are going to see on the screen, what we are going to shoot with the actors, and how we're going to shoot it, and what it's going to look like, and what happens, right? So your job is to break the story, and that means take that vague idea. You know, so there was this guy, and he met this girl, and they fell in love. Okay, how is that playing out on the screen? It's great. That's the idea. You know, there's this guy, and he meets this girl, and they start falling in love. But what are we actually going to see on the screen? That is that story. And this is breaking the story. This is what I mean by breaking the story, where you start to outline, and it's no longer like they just fall in love, but instead it's going, okay, you know, he's in the park and he runs into this girl, and then this happens, and then they go there, and then this happens, and then that happens. You know, it's like, what happens? What are we seeing scene by scene? And so that's the work of doing the story. And when it's really satisfying, you know, when you've worked out the whole story and you're like, this is great, it's compelling, it's got high stakes. And by high stakes, I don't necessarily mean that there's a ticking bomb or someone's going to die. But, you know, there's something that's going to emotionally move people. Because I would go, one of the worst things that we can do is just write something that's kind of boring, where everyone's very nice and everyone's quite gentle and nothing really happens, right? We don't go to the movies for that. We go to the movies for extreme situations, for seeing people face difficult things. And that's true of comedies as much as it's true of dramas. So we need to really be thinking, like, what are they facing and how's it playing out? I'm just going to check some of the comments because they're coming in and I'm not reading them because I'm just chatting away. Okay. I can't read your names. I read 10 books about screenplay. Okay, yes, amazing. And Save the Cat. And I felt like they're giving you a blueprint and formula. Exactly. And I think there's things you can learn from those, and it's like they can be helpful, but just don't let them rule you. Don't think that you have to stick to those exact formulas in order to write a great script, because many great scripts do not stick to those formulas. So don't feel like that's it. I remember learning structure as a kid, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution. Yes, exactly. Exactly. And I think though too, to me, something that's really interesting is exploring beyond that. I often say, I feel like, I think our stories are very masculine in their model, and I'm interested in where we could push storytelling into a more feminine model. So just a thought, where it's like rising action, climax, right? Falling action, resolution. It's like, is there a different model? So it's interesting to play with these things. I just always go you don't have to just stay stuck with that. But that is the basic model. Christina, hello, welcome. Yes, that's where I'm now. Next project, concept without a complete story. Exactly. And it always starts, really as a concept. There's always some sort of thing, I think, initially at the beginning, whether it's an idea for a scene or an idea, just a general idea, wouldn't it be cool to make a movie about this or that, whatever it is. But it really is a completed story, and your first job as a screenwriter is just to take the time to break the story. And that typically doesn't happen as you write it. Typically, you would break it at least to the extent that you have some kind of a roadmap for yourself before you start writing the script. And then you can do it. Okay. So key number one, story, right? Because that is the thing that's number one for screenwriters. Number two is characters. And we touched on this yesterday, but I will die on this hill. Characters drive story. And if they're not driving the story, there's something wrong with your screenplay. So what do I mean by this? Every film in its essence, now won't you just sit with us, is to some extent about a character and their journey, and very possibly the transformation that they experience during that journey as a result of that journey. What you're seeing in a film is typically the most interesting part of that person's life. If they were a real person, this 1.5 hours of story that you're going to watch about their life is the most interesting, most exciting, most eventful, most dramatic, most funny, most something. Otherwise we wouldn't be watching that, right? A story is about someone being changed by something. Now, I know some movies aren't. You might be like, but wait a second, James Bond movies, he doesn't really change, right? And there are sort of exceptions. As I say, those films that might be part of their flaw. But anyway, most films are going to be about who someone is at the beginning of the film and who they are at the end and what happens in between to cause that transformation. Now, when you really key into your characters first, and if you're starting with that thing, you've got a premise for a film, but you're I don't really know what happens. Here's how you figure out what happens. You dive into character, right? And once you start to get to know your characters really, really well, it will start to become clear what needs to happen in the story. Now, an example from my own, and I could give you many examples from my own screenwriting career of this process and how this works, but for example, my first film that I made called Obsoletia, I knew that I wanted to write something. I had that idea for a film that it's about things becoming obsolete, right? I was just I want to make a film about, how fast things become obsolete, about technology and the rate of change with it. I knew it was something a little bit about climate change as well, but I didn't know what the heck was the story. That's that thing. You have an idea of what you want to make a film about, but you don't know what the story is. And then I started to key in on a character, and I thought, what if the character was, for some reason I thought of someone who was obsessed with encyclopedias, right? And the reason for that was actually because I realized that encyclopedias were becoming obsolete. I don't know if many of you as children, if you're old enough like me, you'll remember that there was the Encyclopedia Britannica. There used to be like a salesman who would come to your door, and there was no way my family could ever afford to get Encyclopedia Britannica. But it was basically like my life goal was to get Encyclopedia Britannica. I was the kind of kid who freaking loved encyclopedias, right? Like I would have died to have a set of Encyclopedia Britannica in my house. But it was no way, right? Couldn't afford it. And then one day I'm leaving Santa Monica Library. This is, decades later. And they were literally giving away a whole set of Encyclopedia Britannica, giving it away for free. Okay. And I was just like, that was that moment where for me, I'm like, encyclopedias have become obsolete. These used to be so valuable and now they're giving away for free. This like blew my mind. So this is like these germs of ideas, right? So I was like, so how about if it was a guy who's obsessed with encyclopedias and he wants to keep encyclopedias alive? And this is how it starts. So, you start to explore that character. Now, I still didn't know what the story is because I don't have a story here, right? I have, things I want to explore. I have an idea of what it's about, but I don't have a story. And I literally the same. Yeah, I used to encyclopedias. Okay, so I'm not alone. I know. I was obsessed. So, cut to, by the way, I didn't take the whole set for free. Some of them were already gone. I took a few copies of it. I took a few volumes and I loved it. I was like, having an encyclopedia at home. But anyway, so you can see that at this point, I don't have a story. Like I just have an idea about, what I want to explore, but I have no idea what the story is. But once I started to do the character work, with that, I started to envisage this guy and I thought maybe he works in the library. And, I spent a lot of time in the library. I love the library. Library is like my second home. So I'm like, it's this guy who spends a lot of time in the library and he hates the fact that technology is taking over. He's a complete Luddite. He completely wants to rewind to the years before plastic. And he really is on this mission to try to actually preserve things. And so now as I'm doing it, like I start to know what the story is. Like, here's this guy, he hates change. So what's going to happen in the film? If he hates change, what is going to happen? He's going to have to face his fears. Now, why does he hate change? What's it really about? He's afraid of dying. He's afraid of things ending. He's afraid of death. Okay, if he's afraid of death, then he's got to face death. Now, do you see, like, once you know who your character is, it will become very obvious what needs to happen in your script. It will also become obvious who needs to be in it around them, because once you know your main character, it's like everyone around them is going to have different views. Everyone around them is going to be like opposite of them in some way. Because two people have the same point of view in a movie is boring as fuck. They might as well just be one person. Every person in your movie has to have a different point of view. Right? But once you have that main character, you're like, okay, so here's this guy and he really like is resistant to change and he really wants to go back in time and he thinks everything's going to shit in the world and he hates new technology and he meets this woman and you know what? She's the opposite. She just wants to race forward into the future. She does not want to look back. She's just like, burn the past. Let's go into the future. Right? And the minute you start to you build up these different characters with very different points of view, you go, okay, so he's going to go, now he's afraid of intimacy. Well, he's going to have to get intimate. And it's that thing that as we get to know the character and we know what their biggest fears are, we know what their flaws are, we know the things that are the things that need to be healed in them, then it becomes clear what the script needs to be. Because it's like character is driving story. If the person is going to go on a transformational journey, they're always going to face their biggest fears. They're always going to be facing the things that they hate the most, that their flaws are going to be exposed. Right? And that's really like every script. Every single script. Now, the other aspect of this is when we start to understand a character's flaws and what, their biggest fears, we also have the way into them. We also have the way that the audience will connect with them. Audiences connect through vulnerability. They don't connect through a character's perfection. If a character is just like a perfect person and they're so nice and they're so good and they do everything well, nobody cares, quite frankly. But when we see that chink, when we see what makes them human, that's what people engage with. That now we're like, okay, now I connect with you, right? Like now human to human, I see what you're struggling with, right? And that's the thing, whatever it is that they're struggling with is actually the thing that's ultimately going to be the thing that is either transformed or that stops them from transforming and leads to tragedy. And that's most scripts. And so when we understand that, you understand the importance of the character work. Because if we're just trying to make the story up, but we're not doing it from the character, it's like now we're going to shove the characters into the story and they're going to be puppets. But I encourage you to do it from the inside out. So you start with the character and you really map them out and you really get to know them. And my encouragement to you is that spending time with character before you start even outlining is just so important. Do the character bios. When I don't really know the story of a script, once I do my character bios in depth, then I know what the story is. It just reveals itself to me. And the characters are what unlock it for me. So that I don't have to think, like, what could happen next? Like, what's the story? What would be good? What should happen? Once you know your characters, it will reveal itself every step of the way. And anytime that you're like, I don't know what happens next, you just get quiet and you say, well, what would this character really do? What would be the hardest thing for them to face right now? What would they really hate to happen right now? Right? Because in a way, to be a good screenwriter, you might have heard this before, and it is true. To be a good screenwriter, you have to be a little bit of a sadist. Okay? What I mean by that is you've got to make your characters suffer. You've got to make them suffer. You've got to make it hard for them. If I have one big note that is, a general for like a lot of the screenplays I read, everyone likes their characters too much and we make it too easy for them. And I put myself in this bracket. As a human being, I hate conflict. Like I'm generally just very conflict averse. And I want to make everything good for everybody. I care about other people. I want things to be nice for other people. So then often what happens is I make it too easy for my characters. I start to make it difficult for them and I'm like, oh, that's a little bit too difficult. And I make it a bit nicer for them. I save them too early. A lot of the scripts that I read last year from really nice people, like 9 times out of 10, I was like, you got to make it tougher for them. Like it was too easy for them. So what we want to do is like push them. Push it. What would be the hardest, like as you're writing your script, ask yourself constantly, what would be the worst thing that could happen for them right now? What would make it even more difficult for them right now? Right? Like how do I make this harder for them? And if you keep doing that and keep doing that and keep doing that, you're probably going to end up with a very compelling script. But if you're constantly going like, how do I make it easier for them? It's getting a little hard. And trust me, honestly, if I was going to say like my biggest limitation as a screenwriter up until now, about to change in 2025, my friends, is that I'm too kind to my characters. There's my second film, Bleeding Heart, there's a thing in it that kills me that I'm like, oh, that's not right. Because I was just I was afraid of really going there where I needed to go. And, your fears and your sort of limitations as a human where you're like, I don't want to go there. That's what's going to limit you as a writer. That's what's going to stop you from writing really good stuff. What we need to do as writers is open those doors. We're like, I don't really want to go there. Go there. Go there. There's a great quote from Danny Boyle, who directed Trainspotting and Slumdog Millionaire. He said, you've got to push the pram over the cliff. For my American friends, a pram is like a stroller with the baby in it, And it's like, it's not enough to just walk it up to the edge. You got to push it over. And, you can print that up and put it over your desk as you're writing, because I feel like the thing that keeps a lot of people's scripts in the mediocre category is they're not pushing it over the cliff. They're actually sort of like skirting up to the cliff and then like making it a little bit nicer, right? And making it a little easy. And we've got to like take it further. We've got to take it further. So character. The thing with characters, obviously, is we want to flesh them out and make them into real human beings. Real human beings are very complex. All of us. We're all a bag of tricks. We're all a bag of absolute paradoxes and things that don't make sense. None of us are a straight arrow. I don't think so. Right? Who we are, who we think we are, who we try to be, who we try to present ourselves are, all those things. It's so fascinating. And you've got to get in there with your characters to all the layers, not just who they present themselves as. Again, one of the big flaws I see in a lot of screenwriting is it stays very superficial, where, people are who they say they are and they speak what is on their mind. And I'm like, that's just not real. Let's take a reality check here. Most of us spend a lot of time and a lot of effort not saying what's really on our minds, because we would be ashamed to say it, because we're frightened of the effects of saying it, right? Everyone's quiet here. You're like, that's not true. I just say what's on my mind. Some people do, but most people don't. Listen to people in any cafe. Just sit in a restaurant and listen to people. People do not say what is on their minds, and just observe them. I worked as a waitress for years. It was one of the best jobs for just being like an invisible observer of human beings, right? And human beings are masters of not saying what they really mean or what's really on their mind. And that's what we want to do. That's what we want to do in our screenplays, is create characters who are complex in that level. And it's not just like they are who they say they are, and they're just exactly what they think, and they're just like going around like doing everything straight up. But actually, like, they have all those layers and complexities and things that don't add up and make sense. I often say about characters, when you're writing your characters, look for the details that belie them. Look for the details that don't make sense, right? Look to find things about them that just like, that add that little like, oh, that's so weird. Those are the things that make characters memorable. It makes them human too. It's the thing that makes them connect with us, but it makes them memorable. A really simple example of this, Indiana Jones. What's the one thing everyone remembers about Indiana Jones? Like something, and it's that thing because it's introduced right at the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? We've seen this guy be the superhero, like running and dealing with all this, all these things, being chased by this and that, and then he jumps in that little plane and he's getting away. Now he seems like a superhero. We could have left it there, but what happens then is exactly what humanizes him, and no one forgets it. There's a snake in the plane. He's scared of snakes. Exactly. Right? And it's that thing that's like, oh, he's scared of snakes. He's not a superhuman. He's not, right? He is human. He has fear. And that's what makes him interesting. And that's what makes him human. But if he didn't have that, he would be like a cardboard cutout. This guy's just like a superhero and he's not scared of anything. Everyone's scared of something. Everybody. So delve into your characters, do the character work. And I really encourage you to do that before you write your screenplay, definitely. And ideally before you do the outline, so let the characters be the driving force of it. Get to know them. That film that I was talking about, Obsoletia, so that film obviously premiered at Sundance. It won a number of awards. It was nominated for Independent Spirit Award for screenplay. That script, before I wrote it, I actually spent like 6 months writing a blog, I kid you not, from the perspective of the lead character. That's how I got to know him, right? Like, this was a character that I made up, but I just so wanted to understand his way of seeing the world that I actually wrote a blog from his perspective. True story. So this is what I mean. It's like, how do we really, inhabit them and make them real and explore them on all the different levels? And, on that note, as you're developing your script, trust your intuition. Just trust it. Like that film, I was out filming interviews with people and writing a blog and doing all kinds of things that seemed like nothing to do with writing a screenplay, but they were all essential parts for me to build that world and to create that script. So whatever it takes, we do it. And the characters, start with your main character, write that bio, get that bio in depth, and then build your script around that main character and make sure that every other main character is giving some opposition to your main character, right? It's not just the antagonist. Like if they have a best friend or they have a partner, or they have a buddy or they have whatever, it's like, in what way is that person different? In what way did they see the world differently? And in what way are they going to cause friction and conflict with your main character? Because you need that with every single character. If two characters have identical views on everything, they might as well be the one character. You could just get rid of one. Okay. All right. So key number 2, character. So we've got key 1, story, key 2, character. Key 3, you guys know what's coming, I bet you, if you've been in my world for a while. It's screenwriting style. I cannot stress this one enough. Now, I want to make it clear to you that if you are new to screenwriting, you can like listen to this, but you don't need to stress about it too much. Okay. So if you're about to write your very first screenplay, just get it on the page and then rewatch this video after you've got that vomit draft down, right? I don't want to get you too much in your head. But what do I mean by style? Basically, style isn't what you're saying, but it's how you're saying it. It's the words that you choose to put on the page. It's the order you choose to put them in, right? It's the rhythm of your sentences. It's the cadence of them. It might even extend to the font that you use and the size of the font and the bold and the italics and all that kind of thing, right? It's the poetry of your script. And I have a thing that I think screenwriting is way closer to poetry than to prose. And the reason I say that is like, it's about economy. It's about painting a vivid picture with as few words as possible. Screenwriting is not about big, dense paragraphs, explaining everything and getting all in our heads about it. Screenwriting is about, carving out to the essence. Now, this is really the difference between good screenwriting and great screenwriting. It's style. It's style. A screenplay is a number of things. On one level, it is a technical document, and it's really important that you learn the craft so that you are fulfilling that part of it. By this, I mean, this document is going to be handed out to all these people who are going to make the script into a movie, and they all need to be able to get the information that they need from the script so that they do it really well, so that they do, so that they make the film that you imagined. And I often think of screenwriting as like, the screenwriter imagines the script in their head, and then they capture it on the page in such a way that all these different people read it, they see it in their heads, and they see the same movie, and then they all help actually make it into a film, which is then projected onto a wall, and everybody gets to see the movie that the screenwriter had in their head, 18 months, 2 years before. Amazing. It's like a magic trick, right? Now, the way that can actually happen, though, is by you, first of all, really getting those technical things right so that all the technicians who work on the script can get the information they need. So you have to dial that in. But another aspect of your script is that you're not just giving the technical document, because that would be boring AF to read. And boring AF to read is not going to get made. It's not going to get people backing it. It's not going to get people fighting for it. It's not going to get people passionate about it. And those things need to happen if it's going to actually end up being on the screen. So how do we get people excited about it, passionate about it, fighting to get it made? We get those to happen by mastering screenwriting style so that you're not just telling the story, but you're selling the story. You're making it actually engaging and delightful and exciting to read this script. Like, it's not just that it's an easy read, and that's the bare minimum that it should be, but actually a fucking delight to read, right? Like, I can't put this script down because it's so interesting, right? It's so engaging. It's got me, right? I'm just like captured by it. That's the script that gets made. Not just one that's like, yeah, it's a great story, great characters, but it's like, dum, 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 dum. And I've read quite a few of those scripts, and it's boring. And yeah, you're telling the story, and it's all there, but it's like, then they get in the car, so-and-so's in the front seat, so-and-so's in the passenger seat, these people are in the back seat, they drive to such and such, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, they do this, they do that, he does this, he does that, he does this, he does that. No. And you could have the most fantastic story and the most incredible characters. But if you tell the story that way, it's never going to get made. So your job as a screenwriter is to make it fun to read. It should be like watching the movie. Now, this sort of rewinds all the way to the very beginning of this session, where I talked about, like, what is the purpose of your film? What's the purpose? Why does it exist? Why should it matter? Like, why this? Of all the thousands, tens of thousands of scripts out there, why does your script deserve to get made into a movie? What does it offer human beings that makes it special and unique? And we need to have that already on the page, right there on your script. This is not something that happens magically at the movie stage, because it's never going to get made into a movie if it's not already there in the script. It's not going to happen. And to think that it will is sort of fanciful, And sometimes I talk to screenwriters and they're sort of like, oh, but won't that happen when they make it into film? No, it's got to be there on the page. Now, if you are not au fait with screenwriting style, if you're listening to this and you're like, I think my screenplay is a bit boring the way it's written. First of all, if you do think that, well done you for actually recognizing it. Because a lot of people are delusional. Like, my script is perfectly fine. No, it's quite boring. Right? So we've got to be honest with ourselves. Now, the thing that's great about this, the great news is this is totally fixable and this is totally learnable. And this is screenwriting craft. I mean, this is what makes it special. Like that's what we do. And this is why, it takes work. We're not just born like brilliant screenwriters. We have to work at the craft. And if you work at it, you'll learn. So one thing you can do if you want to get better at style is read more screenplays and pay attention to what the screenwriters are doing to make it engaging. Okay, so read scripts, read a lot of scripts. And please pay attention. Like, what are they doing? Look at how they're describing things. Look at those character descriptions. Cannot stress this enough. Character descriptions, so freaking important. I cannot stand it when I read a script and I'm like, I have no idea what this character is. Right? It's the main character. It's like, Joe, 35, seen better days, blah, blah, blah. Right? And it's like, what? Who is this guy? Actually, Seen Better Days was actually quite a good one compared to some things that I've read. It's like, Joe, 35, tall, with brown hair, right, gets out of his car. And it's like, okay, I have no idea who he is. Like, I don't know who I'm seeing. One of the biggest challenges I think we have as screenwriters, is an issue, just in general, is how much information do we need? I'm sure you've struggled with this. Like, how much is too much and how much is too little? Am I going on and on? Or do I need less? Or more? And it's something that you learn over time through practice. But your job is to paint the picture. Your job is to anchor into those details that really nail it. So you're like, oh, yeah, like you haven't given me a whole big paragraph of description, but you've given me that one line that just anchors it in so I know exactly who this is. It's like, I know that person. I can picture them. I feel them. Now, what I often say when it comes to characters on this front, when we're doing character descriptions, I think it's way less about physical appearances and way more about their energy and their essence. And, I can explain this quite simply. And this is that thing, when you watch a movie, you're getting so much information. So you could say about me, right? You could be like, oh, woman, 50-ish, wearing a hat and a denim shirt, hair, shoulder length hair, right? But I could be that, with that description, I could be like this. Right? And that's the first shot that we see over here. Or I could be like this. Ooh. Right? And it's the same description. I've still got the hat and I've still got the denim shirt and I've still got the hair, but I'm a totally different person. Right? So my thing to you is always, like, what is essential? Is it essential to say that she has shoulder length hair? Probably not. Like, does it really matter for the story? Could she have shorter hair? Could she have longer hair? Probably. And this is that thing of, screenwriting is an art of essentialism. What is essential to know? Do we need to know that she has shoulder length hair? Probably not. Does she need to have a denim shirt? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it is an important thing. Maybe it's not, right? But you need to judge that. What you do need to share, though, is like, who is she being? What's her vibe? What's her energy? Is this somebody who seems like they're excited by life, they're confident, they're at ease in themselves? Or is this somebody who is like beat down by life and like, shell of who they used to be? And, they look like they're guilty even, that they haven't done anything. Like, who is this person being? And when you can focus in on that and just nail those things, so it's painting that picture, but also paying real attention to the inner life of your characters. And this is that thing about style as well, because I feel like so many people get drummed in by various screenwriting teachers telling them, only say what's, you can only write in your screenplay what's actually on the screen. And that's good advice to an extent. Because what I think it ignores is what we actually see on the screen a lot of the time. And so what we see on the screen is not just like a 52-year-old woman with a hat and shoulder-length glasses. We see on the screen immediately a vibe of somebody, right? It's like so much more. We see something of their inner life. And really good actors, we really see the inner life, right? We see anxiety, or we see that they're just trying to hold it together, or we see that they're like, like really proud and really happy and feel like they're winning, or, we feel like we don't just see the physical description. We see their insides. We see inside. And something that's really important in that thing of style and of like how you're saying things is making sure that you are bringing the reader on a journey with that character. And part of that is letting their inner life come through. Now, obviously, there is so much that we could say about this. And by the way, if you are loving this class, there's a couple things. One, if you want to write a screenplay, like you haven't written one, you want to write one, then get into Write Your Screenplay in 8 weeks. You will get lessons every week guiding you through the process of writing a screenplay and learn so much about how to make it great. So it's a great program. If you go to dianebell.com/screenplay2025, you're going to find the link for it on that page. And it's on special offer right now. But I also have on that page a class called Screenplay Mastery. And if this class is like speaking to you and you've already written a screenplay or you're writing one, you feel confident about actually writing it, but you really want to take your screenwriting from good to great, Screenplay Mastery is going to be your jam. Okay, and this goes into like this stuff, but so much. The class on style that's in this course, Screenplay Mastery, so many people who have done it have said this is the best screenwriting class I've been to. What we do in that class, for me to really help you understand style is we analyze a bunch of different pages from different screenplays and look at like why they're working and what effects they're creating and how we can use those. Right. We also actually, I think it's in that class that I share, like a page from a screenplay and then the rewrite of it. So you can just compare. It's that thing like starting to understand the options that you have with how you're putting the words on the page. This is not about what the story is. This is not about who the characters are. This is about how you are telling the story. And I'm telling you right now, this is the difference between writing a so-so script and writing one that actually gets traction. When you understand this, when you master this. So Screenplay Mastery, you're also going to find it on that page, dianebell.com/screenplay2025. So do yourself a favor, get in there if you know that that's something you need to work on. Now, the fourth thing that we want to talk about, the fourth key, so we've got story, character, style. The fourth thing that you want to be aware of, in my opinion, is the truth. And when I talk about the truth in screenwriting, what I'm talking about is believability. There is nothing that takes you quicker out of a screenplay or out of a film than just not believing it. Right? When somebody, you're like, they wouldn't do that. Nobody would behave like that. That's not what would happen. Right? The minute we're in that sort of territory, true or false, we're lost. We're like, nah, can switch off the movie. We are there as long as we believe it, as long as it holds this illusion. And obviously we can be in like a different planet, and it's like, but as long as we believe it and it all makes sense and we're like engaging with it, it's fine, right? So you can construct whatever world you want, but the minute that you drop it and it doesn't feel true to people, you lose it. You lose it. Now, I actually watched a film last year that was so good, and I'm not going to name it here. It was also good. And then it had this one scene that was just like, nah, it just doesn't make sense. It's not real. That's not right. And it was like everything. It's just like from there. Now, this starts with the screenplay. It starts with the screenplay. And something that I really want you to do with your screenwriting is constantly just put it through that sort of sieve or through that grater where you say, is this what would really happen? How would the person really respond here? What would they really do? Because it's so easy to go into, hey, Martha, thank you. And I'm just going to say, I haven't been reading the comments, but I will scan through them before I jump off here. Constantly asking yourself, is this what would really happen? Do I believe this? Is this what that person would do? Am I earning this? And this is so important. Because if it doesn't ring true, and it just feels fake, and it feels movie fake, it's not going to fly. It's not going to fly. And so often I'm reading scripts and I'm just like, it's like, I don't believe it. If I don't believe it, it's not going to happen. It's not going to work. So key number 4 for me is just make it believable. Run it through that processor. Ask constantly as you're writing your screenplay, is this real? Would they really do this? And keep pushing yourself. Keep pushing yourself. Because when we land ourselves in movie fake land, we're writing garbage. And trust me, I've done it. I have done it plenty of times. I am not going to sit here and say everything I've written has the realm of truth. It's not. But I've really come to recognize that this is one of the biggest things. One of my favorite filmmakers ever, Abbas Kiarostami, the Iranian filmmaker, he said that, good cinema is cinema I believe, bad cinema is what I don't believe it. And I really noticed it for myself when I just this is just fake. It's not interesting. We might leave it on, but we're just not interested. We want to do better than that. So play with the truth and really explore what is true, what would be really true, and what's the emotional truth. What would really happen. And again, this often means for us, pushing up against our own limitations, pushing up against our own fears. Because very often as screenwriters, we're holding back in certain areas because we don't feel comfortable to go there. It's I don't want to write about that. I don't want to go there. But we've got to open that door and go there if that's where it needs to go. So those are the main keys. the last thought that I want to leave you with is that most screenplays succeed because they make the audience feel something. And I would say, honestly, the reason that I have sold the scripts that I have sold every single time, the producer who has optioned it, the producer who's paid for it, has said to me, like, when I was reading your script, I couldn't stop laughing. I couldn't stop crying, right? It's always about a feeling, like I felt something when I read it. Now, obviously, beyond that, there's things like a producer is going to be attracted to your script because they can see the film, they can see how they will sell the film, they can see how they'll sell it to actors and get good actors to come on board. They can see how they would sell it to financiers to actually get the money to make the film. They can see how ultimately they'll sell it to an audience to make the money back for their financiers. So they need to be able to see how they can sell it. But they also need to connect with it emotionally. And they're the first person that's going to do that. And ultimately the audience of your film are going to connect with it emotionally, right? Because it's through the emotions that we really fall in love with movies. A movie can be technically brilliant, but if you don't connect emotionally with any of the characters, it's kind of like a so what. You've probably watched movies like that, and it's like, technically, it's great, it's all fine, it's all done well, but it's a big so what, because you didn't engage with it emotionally. And so what I wanted to leave you with is really just dialing in for you, that idea for your script. What is the feeling? What's the dominant feeling of your film? Something that helps me immensely when I'm writing a screenplay is just discerning for myself what that feeling is and being in that mood as much as possible when I'm writing the screenplay. And the way that I personally do this, the way that my shortcut to this is music. And if you've done my course, Write Your Screenplay in 8 weeks, you'll know that I advise right at the beginning, make a playlist for your film. Now, the playlist is not at all about what music would be in the soundtrack. It's got nothing to do with the soundtrack of the movie. What it's about is finding music that dials you into the emotional core of your film. It just makes you feel the way your film feels. So weirdly, Obsoletia for me, there was a couple of tracks. There was one track by Bach, which I listen to all the time, which did end up in the film. If you've seen the film, you'll know. The Well-Tempered Clavier, played by Glenn Gould, was what I always listened to, but we paid a pianist to play it in that style. But the other piece of music that I listened to non-stop, that would never have been in the soundtrack for it, even if we could afford it, it wouldn't have been, because it's not the film, but it was the film, was a song by Radiohead. And this song by Radiohead is called Let Down. I listened to it 20 million times as I was writing that script. And that song just had the power of just bringing me into this feeling that I knew this was the essence of this film. That it's beautiful and fragile and also full of rage all at the same time. And it's it's a sad and beautiful world vibe, right? And it was just exactly the vibe for me. And whenever I listened to that piece of music, I'd be okay, get me, I'm in the world now. And, I feel when you know what the feeling is for your film, maybe it's light and it's upbeat, or maybe it's tense, or, but it's when you get that feeling, that's your key. And when you can listen to that piece of music again and again, and you just it takes you into the world of your film, and you channel the film, and you let it come through, that's the key, right? That's your key. Because ultimately someone's going to fall in love with your script, not because it's all perfectly written, not because you got every bit of the story right. By the way, when you sell a script, when somebody options it, it's not because the script is perfect. What happens first when somebody options your script is you get a shitload of notes and you get to rewrite that script, right? They don't option it because it's perfect and ready to go. They option it because they see what it can be and they feel it, and that essence is there, and it's strong, it's powerful. Your script has a voice. It stands for something. It's about something. It matters. And scripts like that, it's they just set you on, it's woo, it's undeniable what it is. And so really think about this, what is your film about? What is the feeling that you want to create in your audience with your movie? How do you want your audience to feel when they get to the end of your movie, halfway through the movie? What's the feeling? And if you can focus on that and make sure you deliver that through your script, it actually really doesn't matter to some extent if it's not technically perfect, or if the story structure is not perfect. You'll figure it out with your producers. And that's the thing that I really want you to understand as well as we wrap this up. Screenwriting is a process, and ultimately it's a collaborative process, right? This is not something where like you write your work of genius and now people go film it and it's like there's like Shakespeare and it has to be word perfect. That's not films. You will write your script and it'll be a fabulous thing. You pour your love into it and you pour your heart into it and you make it fabulous. You take it out to the marketplace, you option it. And now new people are involved and they love it and they pour their hearts into it too. And it's a collaboration. And it gets to the point, a director comes involved and actors come involved, right? And all of these different people pour their hearts into it. And that's what makes it better. That's what makes it stronger. That's what makes it bigger. It doesn't shrink it, it expands it, makes it better. So, what you're doing as a screenwriter, it's just the first stage of this, right? It's the first part. And it starts with you. And it starts with you knowing what it is. It starts with you really like getting focused on what that feeling is for you. So take that away from this. Go find your piece of music if you don't know what it is, that you're just like, that's the feeling of my movie. Like, that's what I want my movie to feel like. That's what I want my audience to feel like. The feeling that I get when I listen to this piece of music, that's it. And if you don't know what it is right now, spend a few hours on Spotify, explore music, even music you've never listened to, explore soundtracks. Think, well, it's kind of like that movie. Listen to the soundtrack of that movie. Explore until you find that piece of music that you're like, that's my movie. And that's going to be one of your biggest secret weapons, your biggest tools to actually writing something incredible. So I'm going to wrap this up in a minute. I'm going to scroll through your comments to see if there's any pressing questions. I hope this has been helpful. We have covered these 4 keys. We've covered much more than that too. If you do have any questions right now, you can pop them into the chat, or you can send me a message later. And I was just going to say, seriously, if you want to write a screenplay this year and you would like my guidance doing so, write your screenplay in 8 weeks. It is on a special offer right now. So go to dianebell.com/screenplay 2025. Then you can sign up there. I'd love to have you join us. It's an amazing family, super supportive, amazing, community. And then also if you're like, Dan, I don't need that. I've already written my screenplay. There's so many other things and other ways that I can help you. You're going to find a bunch of them on that page. And if you have questions for me, just send me the question on Instagram and we can figure it out. If you're like, Dan, I don't know, I'm thinking maybe the Screenwriters Mastermind is for me or maybe the network, but I don't know which is better. Ask away and let's help you find the right path. But I would love to help you. Okay. I'm just going to scroll back. Lots of comments. Brian James, happy New Year to you. Okay, so camera angles. No, you don't need all the camera angles. In fact, in modern contemporary screenwriting, it's quite rare. Like, your job isn't to direct, the film. You don't actually get to decide where the camera goes. The director and the DP will decide that. But having said that, I think that screenwriting is like an art of manipulation, whereby you want to suggest it so that they see the movie the way you see it and they know where to put the camera. And you can do that through a variety of means. There's different ways that you do that. So you are like doing it, but in a more subtle way. So instead of saying, camera needs to be here, camera close on, right? Camera moves there. Instead of saying that, you find ways to just focus them on what they're focusing on, right? And they will see it the way you see it. Captivate your audience. Yeah, we don't need camera angles. It's story and character 100%, and painting the picture, just painting the picture so people can see the film the way you see it. Do you have and the production script isn't like, the script you use for the production isn't really like different in a sense, right? Like what happens when a film goes into production is we lock the script, and that's when it's numbered. So you shouldn't have the scenes numbered when you're just writing it. That comes afterwards when it gets locked. But it's not like suddenly it gets certain things added for the production script. It's just the same. It's just the same except numbered. Okay, I'm going to scroll down. But when I write out the story, I can visualize it in my head. Yeah, so that your job, baby girl, your job is to see it in your head, and don't shy away from that. Like, your job is to see the movie in your head. That's being a screenwriter. And I do sometimes see people being a little bit vague in their screenplays, and they're like, well, I just thought the director could decide. And I'm like, no, that doesn't cut it. Like, you have to decide. That's your job. So you have to be really specific and anchor your script into details. So you are saying what it looks like, but be clear about what is important or not. Like, so if you're imagining, somebody in their bedroom, for instance, like, you don't need to name every piece of furniture that's in the room, right? And be like, she's sitting on her bed. It has this kind of duvet cover. Next to the bed is this. There's this kind of lamp. Above the lamp, there's this kind of picture, and it's like, la, 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 boring, boring, boring. And you're doing the job of the production designer and of the director and of, you don't need to do that. But it's like, you have to paint that picture still. Like, what could you tell me about that room that just makes it essential so I can picture it and I get it and I know it and I can feel it without, like, detailing all the things. And that's the balance of screenwriting. Like, that's the craft part, right? Painting a picture in as few words as possible, but painting what is essential. And that's why, as I said, read lots of scripts, because that helps you a lot. I'm going to stick what I'm supposed to write. Okay. There are quirky films like Little Miss Sunshine which seem unbelievable but are emotionally true. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's tons of movies that, like, they're, that's the thing. Like, they're pushing reality or what would really happen, but they stayed completely emotionally true. And Little Miss Sunshine, as absurd as some of the things that happen in it are, like, it all feels believable. There's no point where you say, oh, that could never happen, that would never happen, because you're so just invested in that ride, and so then you're like, okay. So emotional truth is the thing. Check out my new docuseries. Okay, congratulations on making that. Baby Girl said, I watched so many movies and shows to know that it's definitely true. I know it's good if they made me feel something. Exactly. And that's it. That's what we're looking for, is feeling something. Like, if it's a scary film, gotta scare people. If it's a funny film, gotta make them laugh, right? Gotta make them feel. And that, your script should do that too. It's not like the script is just some boring blueprint and then the movie makes people feel something. The script should make them feel that. When they read that script, they should be laughing out loud or crying or, like, going, oh God, this is giving me the chills. That's it. Oh, thank you, Christina. I'm so happy. Can I start my screenplay from scene in the middle and let it grow from the inside? You can do whatever you like. This is the beauty of being a creative person. You get to do you, and you get to do it your way. If you want to start the scene in the middle and let it grow, try it. I personally wouldn't do that, but I'm never going to say don't do it. You get to do you. So give it a shot if that's what you feel called to do. And this is what I really think is important. We are artists, right? We get to explore. We get to find our own way. We get to try things out. That thing of like, but is this right? Has anyone done this before? Well, fuck it. If no one's done it before, why don't you try it? Let's find out. Give it a shot. I started doing camera angles. Yeah, you don't need to do camera angles. No camera angles. Unless, but that's that thing with, like, rules, no camera angles. But sometimes it is the right thing. Like, sometimes it is like the camera moves in on. It's okay. This is that thing. You don't want an excess of that. It slows down the reading of a script. But if it feels very appropriate at times, do it. Okay, MacMoan, I've been taking too long to write because I think it should be perfect. Yes, that's a problem. You are wasting time overthinking. So permission to write crap, MacMoan, right? And, I always say this, it shouldn't be perfect. It doesn't need to be perfect. Like, even when you actually go out to sell a script, it still doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be good enough. And there's a big difference between good enough and perfect. If I thought my scripts needed to be perfect before I sold them, I never would have sold a single script. If I thought they had to be perfect before I made them, like raised money and made them into movies, I never would have made a movie. So we are not seeking perfection, because that's a holy grail we'll never reach. We just want it to be good enough. And when it actually comes to screenwriting, I just feel like there gets to a point with your screenplay, and it might take a lot of drafts to get there. It might take 10 drafts or something. It gets to a point where it's like, it is what it is, and I'm like, that's the point at which it's like, let's go out, because either someone's going to respond to it or they're not, and we can keep changing things and shifting things, but it's not really making it that different, right? It's just making it slightly different. It's not making it better. So, the goal is to write the best thing you can always, to tell the best story in the best way you can, and to do the work to make it the best it can be. But perfect, it doesn't need to be. Definitely not. So don't overthink it. Your energy matters a lot. Your excitement about your project. And like for me, I know when I've gone out with scripts, I've never gone like, this is perfect. I'm always like, I know this still needs work, but here it is, and I'm excited about it. Okay, you're welcome, Kimbers. Thanks for being here. Script waitress, thank you so much. That's awesome. That's the best thing you can say to me. Script waitress said, you're the best motivator. One life with you. I'm going to run to my desk and write. Yay. The script is about the journey, right? To have them locked to your story. Yes, it's about the journey. It's always about the journey. You would be validated. You should have seen it. That's awesome. Okay, I've made it through all the comments. So if anyone's got any last comments or questions, please chuck it in. Music copyright, I'm not sure what that means. So I don't know if you're asking whether you can, whether you need the copyright to music. If you're referring to what I was talking about, music copyright, please. I still don't know what your question is. If you could just explain the question. I'm not really sure what the question is there. But I will just say, obviously, like listening to music while you're writing, you can listen to whatever you want. And including, I don't know if this is a question, meaning like if you include mention of a script, some piece of music in your script, you can do that, but, it may or may not actually get used. And, you don't actually control that. That's going to be the decision for director, producer, music supervisor on the film, and they would figure out the copyright. You can technically mention it in your script if you want. When it's an unproduced screenplay, it's fine, but it may or may not get used, and it's not your ultimate decision. If you choose a song, can you use it? No, as I said, like it's not a screenwriter's job to choose the music for a film. You can mention it, and it's like a suggestion to the director and the producer, but they're the ones who would decide, and it would depend a lot on their budget. If you're making a very small budget movie, most songs are going to be out of your reach. Does one pay for the music? The film production company. So your job as a screenwriter, and I'm always like saying this to screenwriters, like you're not the producer of the movie and you're not the director of the movie. So you wouldn't ultimately be responsible. You're not responsible for the budget. You're not responsible for paying for rights for music. That would be something that would be decided by the producers of the movie. And so you're free to like mention a song if you want to. But again, going back to essentialism, my question always to any screenwriter who wants to mention songs in their script is, does it really add something to the script? Is it really essential? Does it really matter? Because even as a director, I know that often it actually doesn't, right? Even as a director, I know that we get attached to a certain song, but it could just as well be another song that sounds like it. It could be another piece of music. It really doesn't need to be that one. So as a screenwriter, I would urge you to go like, does it really need to be that? Am I really adding to the script by mentioning that? And if it does, if you're like, yeah, I would die on this hill, it's got to be in it, it's like essential, then put it in. But it's got to be essential. Otherwise, don't mention it. Okay. Yes. Thank you for mentioning the emotional stuff. Experience I'm stuck with emotions of the main character that mirror myself. Yes. I think we all experience this. And as I said, I feel like our limitations as writers often correspond to our limitations as human beings. And I say this in the nicest possible way. And I know, as I said, like I've been on this journey now for a long time. I know that, like I avoid drama in life, so I'll often avoid it on the page. Of course, it's me. But this is where it gets juicy, because it's like, how do we push ourselves, right? How do we actually go beyond and really serve the story? And that's what I always come back to. Your script has to serve the story. It's not serving you. It's serving the story that you're here to tell. I'm doing a script called Coolio. I need his music, for example. Yeah. Well, obviously, if you're doing a script about, a musician, you will ultimately... But you can write the script, but your first stop really is going to be that artist, because without their permission, you don't have a movie, right? So it's going to be about really getting them attached. Thank you so much. Keep you looking. You're gorgeous. I appreciate you. All right, I am wrapping this up, my loves. I hope this has been helpful. I hope this has inspired you. I hope this has got your wheels turning. If you want my guidance writing your script, join us and write your screenplay in 8 weeks. It's on offer right now. You'll find the link at dianebell.com/screenplay2025. I would love for you to join us and be part of our group. And otherwise, if you're further along on the journey, I would invite you to consider joining the network. You know, the network is my group for screenwriters and filmmakers. We have such an incredible group of people in there. And when you join the network, not only do you get access to a whole library of courses, and honestly, I know it's a little bit much because you join there, you get screenplay mastery, pitchcraft mastery, you get the Sell Your Screenplay trilogy, you get so many things that are going to help you thrive. But you also, most importantly, get my coaching. Okay, so if you're looking for a pretty high touch, like I want to be able to bounce ideas off you and get your guidance, the network is for you. Check it out. Okay. And again, you'll find the link on that page, dianebell.com/screenplay2025. All right. Thank you, Krista. Okay. I'm not sure how you say your name. This is the problem with Instagram. I was like, how do we say that? But thank you so much. Go and blossom today and go check out that page and come into my world and let's get your screenplay written and have a magical time doing it. Thank you so much for being here today and I will see you soon. Bye.